Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Garrick, welcome to this week's episode of the Bald Guy Support
That's
Crew.
right.
I was thinking when I was going to have you on that I might, maybe for this episode I shouldn't wear my hat, but I realized I probably also should be comfortable. But,
Yeah.
Jokes aside, super excited to have you here today. Super excited for the conversation on so many levels. One, for anybody listening, Mike and I just did a cold plunge, which I appreciate you for that. Got me out of my comfort zone today, which is always a really good thing. But on Instagram, your Instagram handle is I know I told you I was going to butcher it. Mind Nutrition Body.
Yep.
Right.
There you go.
So I got it. I just hesitated.
That's it. It's a little hard to say.
Mind Nutrition Body.
Uh-huh.
And if you're not following Mike on Instagram, you need to be, because the type of content that you're putting out is refreshing. And the vulnerability, the messaging, your energy, your enthusiasm, it's infectious. It's attractive. It's just incredible. And so I've been looking forward to, having the opportunity to pick your brain. Gosh, months now. We've got our mutual friend Schaefer, and we've connected
Schaefer,
on Instagram.
That guy.
And anyway, it's just I've been really looking forward to this for a few reasons, like I had mentioned. And for me, we've got a lot of similar backgrounds in terms of the fire service and kind of on these journeys for being the best versions of ourselves and things like that. Yeah. But my whole initiative with Chasing Greatness is this idea of sort of holistic greatness, like, all components of our life. And that's why I love when I'm, consuming your content, that it's mind, nutrition, body, it's all of these different things. What I'd love to do, if you're up for it, is you, through Instagram messaging a while back, had relayed a bit of a story to me about what sort of had thrust you into this coaching world as it related to your fire service and things like that. I think that background would be super important to kind of lay the foundation for where I get to pick your brain. Do you mind sharing with me, kind of paint the picture of your life as a firefighter and how things evolved to get you kind of to pursue this journey that you're on, this coaching journey that you're on?
Absolutely. I think that's a great place to start, because it is where most of where everything started for me, because as a kid, my dad helped me kind of pick out a career, which was the fire service. And when I got into the fire service, I didn't realize how unprepared I was, because you think that going through the training that they're going to teach you how to handle this stuff, and they don't. So you get in there and you start to shoulder all of this trauma and chaos. And you don't realize that in your personal life, you already have a certain threshold for that. And then you just start stacking it on and stacking it on. And you think, like, as a young kid, I was like, because I started when I was 18, 19. And
right out of high school.
Right out of high school, basically. I went through a couple jobs, and I was like aiming a little bit higher, because you go and work some crap jobs here and there, and you just like roll your eyes and you're like, I'm gonna go for something. And so I did, but my dad helped me with that. But you don't realize that you start to shoulder all this stuff, and you just like, oh, don't worry, like ego. You think I can handle it, and I can handle it, and I can handle it, and you're not processing it. You're not actually growing from it. You're just taking it in, like men do. We just take it in and take it in and take it in, and we don't actually process it and learn like what's going on. Because when you see, like we talked about this earlier, when you see something super traumatic, like you come upon a car accident, and you can imagine, our audience can imagine what that would be like. But we're supposed to show up, and we're supposed to be the people who go and actually, calm everything down, command presence, and go and take the scene and take care of these people. Well, then when we leave and we go back to the station, like sometimes guys will talk about it, but a lot of times we just are like, well, let's go back. We have dinner, or you joke about it.
You try to.
And I think as firefighters, we've learned that humor is a very good way of coping, but it doesn't process the stuff.
Right.
And I didn't realize that. And what happened was that was building, but over here in my personal life was not going well either. And I had a really major event happen in my personal life, which just put it up over the top. And what happened is emotionally, my nervous system broke. I developed what's called Bell's palsy, which a lot of people, it's not uncommon, and it comes on during periods of extremely high stress, and it's where half of your face becomes paralyzed. And some people, they never recover, and so they'll have, it looks like they've had a stroke on one side of their face, for the rest of their life. There's multiple firefighters that I know that actually have that.
And that's caused from stress?
Yeah.
Nervous system failure?
Yes, it's high stress is when people usually develop something like that. And it can develop any time in people's life, but generally it's during super high stressful periods. So if you don't learn how to process the stress, then your nervous system will break. You'll develop a disease, you'll break down in some way or the other, or develop some type of mental disorders in general. And so at the fire service, we always joke around because generally when people get fired from the fire service, it's not from what you would think. It's not because they can't do their job. It's all this weird stuff that comes out. And like when people don't process what they need to process, it'll come out in other ways.
Right.
So when I broke, it took me 6 weeks of recovering, and I went all in on recovering because I'm very holistic like that, and I go all in on things. And I realized I don't have any tools to cope with this stuff, and neither does anybody around me. Like, nobody knows. Like, a lot of my friends were drinking. So at the time, like I was very into health, but at the same time I was going out and I was partying, and I would drink, and then I would go like have a weekend of partying, and then I would come back and realize it was counterproductive with this over here, what I was trying to do. And so I realized that wasn't, and then my dad was an alcoholic. So like I have that background that I had to be very careful about too. So I remember one of my chiefs actually told me about the movie The Secret came out, right? And he's like, "Have you seen The Secret?" And I was like, "No." And I went and watched The Secret. And even though I'm not like a huge fan of The Secret per se, there was a lot of the people that were on it. Like they talked about Napoleon Hill, who was a big personal development. He was like the grandfather of personal development. Bob Proctor, Joe Dispenza, some of these great guys. It just opened up the door to personal development for me. And that's what started it all, to be honest with you. So it was like this major like trauma, and then a breakdown of my nervous system, and then me looking for answers.
Yeah.
That's really where it started.
And when you were looking for answers, was that from a perspective of because you weren't liking how you're feeling, like you wanted to get something pulled back? Like what was kind of, because I think a lot of times, and one thing I'm interested about, especially with your story, is that it's one thing to have what I'll call kind of a self-help junkies, right? Like there's many of us out there. What's more unique in your case, and this is why I think it's so inspiring, is the ability to pull yourself out of a dark place, to pull yourself out of, that challenging. Walk me through that. Like, was there a rock bottom? Was it I know I'm meant to be more than this, I just don't feel good? Like, what was the real, did you feel like you had to show up for, someone other than yourself? I would love to hear the motivational, or not the driving force behind how in the world you were able to pull yourself out of, because it was clearly, it's very significant to have, Bell's palsy and things like that. How did you find clarity and motivation to pull yourself from that space?
Let me tell you a quick story about this, because, I, especially back then, like I have a tendency to be a little bit, I'm like a lot of people, I have some vanity. And when you have half your face paralyzed and you got to go to the fire station, guys are brutal. It
doesn't look good. Yeah.
Holy shit, they are brutal, right? And at that point, because I was going through so much pain, I was a little sensitive, and there was this breaking point where all of a sudden I started to make fun of myself, and I started to lean into that and not take myself so serious on that aspect. And me and my friend at the time, we were at this restaurant, and I was drinking this bowl of I think it was miso soup, and I went like this, and I drank it, and it just like drained, because it's everything's paralyzed, the mouth, the eyes, like you can't shrug your eyes like nothing. It looks really weird. So I went to drink this soup, and it just like ran out my mouth and went all over the table, and me and my friend started laughing so hard we were crying, and I realized like right then in that moment that if I could like use this dark time in my life, because I was the rock in a lot of people in my life, and they saw me break, and it scared a lot of people. So I flipped it, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to use this, right? And I'm going to use it as a springboard to go forward and to be even stronger. And that's what I think it's like when you go into these dark places is, yes, you go into the darkness, and you have to sit in the darkness, which is the pain and the unknowing, the uncertainty, And you have to be willing to be there for a long enough period of time to where you learn. Because most people, like the cold plunge, you get in the cold and then you just jump right back out. That's the tendency. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what people do. Like, that's what our bodies, and we're, that's
Fight
us
or flight.
it's fight or flight. It's us
Yeah.
being smart, right? You touch the stove and you pull back. But in life, you start to realize, oh, this pain is here to teach me something. And if you can like sit in the pain long enough to where you can go deep enough to learn. And so I realized, I'm like, okay, like this is happening for a reason. Like I need to learn more about like relationship stuff and about my emotional stamina. I need to learn more about how to process stress, like all these things that I had no clue about. My family didn't know any. The only thing I knew, the gift that my dad gave me, was the outdoors. Like I was able to go to the outdoors and decompress, and then my dad also taught me about humor. So we'd always could laugh at ourselves, and then I get the outdoors, right?
Yeah.
But that would only go so far. So I wanted to take it further so that if I knew that if I'm like, the better I get, the better everybody else around me gets.
Right.
That's kind of been one of my mantras. I've been younger. I learned that from my brother. And so I thought, okay, well, if I can go through this pain and I can learn from it, then I'll be able to help other people. And there's something that I think that is so amazing that we live in this time, that you can literally get on Amazon and you can find the best books in the world written on a subject that you want. And you can get 5 of them. Let's say the ultimate, like the best of the best of the best, right? And you can have those books sent to your house. And if you don't want to read them, you can get them on audiobook and you can listen to them. And then you can take something where somebody has taken their whole life to study, emotional IQ or mental toughness or whatever, and then you can go through it and you can learn these tools. That to me, I'm like, that is mind-blowing to me. So that's what I started doing. I started to become a voracious reader. In fact, the guys I had like motivational books stacked on top of the toilet at the stations, and they're like, there's Mike's motivational crap again, and,
Right.
and it was just funny because like these guys, they saw me and they started to watch me progress. They started to watch me get better, and I started getting better, and I started getting better. And I got to the point where I would go to my family members, I'd be like, okay, I need to learn more about myself. So tell me about like what, maybe my weaknesses. And so then they start telling me, I'm like, it hurts.
Not
hurts,
that.
And so
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay. And so I'd go away for a couple of weeks and then I'd come back and I'd be like, okay, tell me more. Let's go deeper, And then they tell me, I'm like, it stings. The truth hurts. But then all of a sudden it just opens up and you start to love the progress and who you become way more than the pain.
Yeah.
So like the cold, you got 15, 20 seconds or a couple of minutes of intense pain and then 4 hours of bliss.
Feeling great.
Isn't that a good return on
Yeah.
investment? It is to me. Some people, either they don't know that or they don't believe that. But to me, I'm like, put me in the pain, put me in the darkness so that I can learn from that and I can come out stronger so that I can help my people.
Have you always had that mentality, or is that something new that you've found of like being willing? Because it's almost, in a lot of ways, it's sort of, I'll call it delayed gratification of like, I'm willing to do the hard thing now for a better outcome later. Did you find that through sort of this process, or is that something that's been kind of ingrained in you for forever?
It's a practice. It's a practice it's a
Interesting.
practice. And I love the word practice because people will like, oh, you're this way. You've always been positive, Mike. And I'm like, what's interesting is that people say that, but it's because it's a decision that I've made, and I made it at a young age, okay? But they don't see the depression, they don't see all the tears, they don't see the intense anxiety, they don't see all that stuff that you have to work through,
Right?
That you have to process, and the worth comes from the work every time. Every time you have that gap of your potential of who you could be versus who you're being, the farther that gap is, the more suffering that there is. And when you start to narrow that gap and come up to where the best you can be on a moment-to-moment basis, like that's where you get that feeling inside. You're rewarded at those high levels of states that we're looking for. It's that work that we're avoiding.
Yeah.
And when we just embrace it and we go into it and we start learning and you practice it, you're like, oh. So for me, it was kind of a combination of, okay, my life's not working right now. I need to find some tools. And I love my people so much that I want to become this person that they can rely on and they can lean on, right? Like that is the ultimate driving force for me is that being better for everybody that I love, so that when like I can be that man that when times get tough, they can lean on me and they can come to me and they can ask me and I can be like, man, I can put my arm around and be like, this is what I've experienced. I've experienced some intense pain, and maybe I can give them, something that they can take from that.
Which I think, what a perfect combination of like, because the work has to be done for ourselves, right? Like the internal motivation has to come from there. But then knowing that there's also the ability to help others more after the work. I've never really thought of that, of what a great combination of the two. Like the better I am, the better I can, help the people that I love around me. You said something too that is interesting in terms of like, I forget exactly how you worded it, but this gap between who you are and who you want to be, and closing that gap and things like that. Somewhere a while back, I read something that just, rocked me. And it was basically that hell is when who you are meets who you could have been. And I'm like, oof, like that's heavy, because becoming these versions of ourselves that we want to be is so challenging. But it's crazy how once you start to see a little bit of momentum, that then you can ride that. And one of the things that I'm still kind of hung up on and looking for a little more clarity, because I think it's remarkable in your story, and I think valuable for anybody listening, is step one, because like in my life, from my perspective, at least, like my seat right now, I've got momentum.
Yeah.
And momentum's great because I've had, and I don't even, when I look back, trying to think, I don't know, like, because some of it for me wasn't intentional. You talk about the positivity side of it. I related to that in a huge way too. I believe in a very, very powerful way that, our mindset matters in a ton. And in fact, I just had, the episode will be released next week, speaking about nervous system and Bell's palsy and those things like that. I just had a chiropractor, Dr. Chris Wood, on the podcast last week, and dawned on me how critical our nervous system is. And in that context, it was chiropractic care, opening the signals and all of that. But, so I've trained myself on being optimistic and positive, and then seeing stuff positively, because I've seen how that impacts my life. But my question is for you, and maybe it's in context of your own story and how that happened, or with your coaching hat on, advice to others. Step one, we're in a dark place. We're not liking where we're at. We know we need to be somewhere. The work, though, because you haven't seen the fruits of the labor yet, because all you see now is the part that sucks, the work. What's your advice, or what was your personal approach to step one? And what did that look like?
So I think it's going to be different for a lot of people, but ultimately, you'll hear me talk a lot about pain, because I'm a big fan of pain. And I say that in that it's meant to move you, like it's meant to move us. And when you can take that pain that you're feeling inside, whether it's emotional pain or physical pain, whatever it is, and listen to it. Like, people don't listen to it. They try to get out of it as fast as they can, but listen to it. Like, what is it trying to tell you? Most of us, we're doing things and it's all about us, which is fine, because the first part of life, you're supposed to develop you, right? And then once you develop you, you're able to give that away. And then that becomes my favorite. I learned this from Wes Watson, who was my coach at one time. And he said that our purpose is to acquire what we admire and then give it away to the world. And that is one of the coolest things that I've heard in the last decade, because it's summed up in a sentence, and it's like this perfect cycle. Build you, and then that gives you the confidence and the feeling of worth, and then you give it away, and that gives you fulfillment, which is the last thing that people are usually missing in their life, right? When people become very good at what they do, they don't give it away. They don't give it away. You got to build you, give it away. Build you, give it away. So when people are in a dark place, understand you're probably just thinking about you, okay? Which is fine, and it's okay, but be aware of that. Be like, oh, I'm not thinking about the person that needs me. Like I'm not thinking about my wife. I'm not thinking about my kids. I'm not thinking about my neighbor. I'm not thinking about my nephews. I'm not thinking about, when you all of a sudden get out of you and you just go, I got to wake up for them. Everything shifts, right? So, but let's go back to the person who's in a dark place, and they're in that place they can't be there, okay? Because it's like things get heavy and things get dark.
Yeah.
So you need a routine. Okay, you need a routine. And the darker and harder life gets, the more you have to double down on your routine. So what I am trying to teach people, specifically men, is how to take your power back. Because there's something called learned helplessness, which is a form of male depression. It's the most common form of male depression. And men are usually depressed because they feel like they don't have power. and they have power in the things that they can do but are not doing. Here's that gap, okay? Well, what do you have power over? What time you wake up, how you move your body, so working out, okay? What you put in your mind, personal development, what you put in your mouth, like the nutrition, okay? And who you spend time around. That's the blueprint.
Control the controllables.
If you're not controlling those, you have no business doing anything else, because this is what, as a man, you have complete control over, okay? And guess what? As soon as you start doing those, you fill your own glass up.
Right.
And then once you fill your own glass up, now I can take it and I can pour it into my people every single day. And that is what makes you feel powerful, because you're building you, and you start to see your mind starts to change, your body starts to change, then you're able to influence other people, and then the cycle continues. And that's what it's about, right? That's what you're trying to do. What is it that I admire? This is why that phrase I told you, acquire what you admire and then give it away to the world. Why it's so perfect is because it works for every single person, because everybody admires something different, right? What do you admire? Well, obviously, I admire people who are muscular, who are lean, who have a lot of energy, who are powerful, who are positive, right? And like, there's all these things, and I could go on and on and on. And so you get to decide and define what it is that you want. And then you go to work every day doing it early. First thing.
Yeah.
Right? Invest in you before you start putting everything into everybody else. And that's what most guys do, is they start to sacrifice themselves. Okay. And then they get to the point where they're like, what's the point? Because then, people come back on them, and they don't have anything they're not validating themselves. They're trying to get validation through all this other stuff. And if they validate themselves through their own work by doing it early before they go out, because when people have families and businesses to run, you got to do this stuff first thing. You wake up as early as you need to get your workout done, right? To do your personal development, to meditate, to pray, whatever it is that you do, to fill your glass up. And then guess what? You're able to show up for your family and for your people. Now you're up here. You don't show up down here resentful and empty. You show up here. You're ready to go. You're ready to serve. And you love it, because you realize that's my purpose. I did my first part, because it's for your whole life. You keep building yourself up and then giving it away. But it's also, you bring it down to the day. How do I fill myself up today? Right? Well, I wake up early. That's the first win. Okay? That is the first win that anybody can do. Right? If you wake up normally at 8, we'll get up at 7 or 6 or 5. See what happens, right? And then control your diet. Control your exercise. Start reading. Just get it, you probably have a book, in the back of your mind that you've been wanting to read for a long time, that's going to help. Sit on the desk, when I go over, read a paragraph. See, I tell people scale but never miss. It's one of my favorite principles. Scale but never miss. If you decide that it's very important, scale but never miss, right? You can meditate for 1 minute a day, every single day at the same time.
Which is exponentially more than 0.
Right? And then guess what? 1 turns into 5 or 10 or 15 or whatever you want it to be, right? You wake up, people are like, oh, I can't go to the gym. Can you walk around the block? Can you walk up and down your stairs? Could you get up and do 50 air squats? They're playing the wrong game, right? So when they start to play this game, it gets exciting, because then it's like you start to play a game, and it's just every day you get better.
Right.
That's
just a little bit better.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And then, what people don't realize, at the end of the day, I won today. And all you have to do is repeat that tomorrow.
Yeah.
But then, like we talked about earlier, you're talking about how life gets in the way, right? Well, guess what? When life gets in the way, if you're not prepared, you're not mentally and physically, you haven't been training, you're going to get laid out. You're going to get leveled. You have to be training. You are training for real life over here.
Right.
Right? You're training your mind. You're training your body. You're training to have capacity. I love that word, capacity. If you don't have capacity, dude, you got 3 kids. Dude, your capacity is already up here, right? Well, you start adding business and marriage and death and everything else on top of that, man, you better have some serious capacity. Yeah. You have to train for that.
So I'm interested to unpack you had talked about especially for men, I'll call it conflicting realities between, because I related that in a huge way. There's a Jordan Peterson quote. I'm probably going to butcher it. It's essentially that there's no nobility in martyrdom. And what he means by that is that always sacrificing is actually not the noble thing, which I've wrestled with, because I'm a guy that takes pride in sacrificing for my family, my employees, my community. like I've almost sometimes in the past worn it as a noble badge. Like I'm willing to sacrifice this so that others can have more. You added a layer of complexity to that I think is almost clarifies it, where if you fill yourself up first, you do the work first, then you can sacrifice. It's almost like, which I'm trying to think about how to articulate that, because there's, as men and fathers, and I think, just kind of, well, I can only speak to that because I'm a man. That's the only thing I only context I have.
Yeah.
But most of us are wired, I think, to be caregivers, to protect, provide, take care of one another, whether it's our families, our communities, the people that work for us or whatever. But realizing how important it is that we take care of ourselves so that we can take care of those that rely on us, it almost changes the idea then of it being a sacrifice in general. Like, we control the things that we can control so that we're built up, we're stronger, we've put in the work, we've done we've practiced, to use your words, which then helps us do that in a way that doesn't drain us. And that is something I think I've never really considered, that we can still sacrifice for others, but in a healthy way. We still take care of others, but in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
First off, I love Jordan Peterson. He's one of my heroes. Second, I think he's one of the smartest guys there is. Second off, think about it this way when it comes to sacrifice. Sacrifice is, you don't sacrifice for the sake of sacrificing. You're sacrificing something of lesser value for something of higher value.
Ooh.
Okay, that's what's called a distinction. A distinction is the difference between night and day. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. And I love things like that because, well, there's a responsibility there, because once you know a distinction, now you know.
Yeah.
Right? And so you can't unknow what you know. So sacrificing something that's of higher value. So when you have a family like you do, okay, well, what are you doing? You're sacrificing like Netflix or wasting time for investing in your children. And I use the term investment.
Right.
Like, you were investing in these people.
But the caveat is that it's the lower value.
The lower value that you're sacrificing for the higher value. Okay?
Right.
And that's what we're always clarifying and going through and making sure that we're doing, because we're looking at what are we doing in a period of a day, right? And how can we take and be more effective in these areas and these things that are more important, that have more return on investment for what we're able to do, so that we can come back, like you said, and you can just be present for your children or for your wife.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't do this over here, you won't be present, because in the back of your mind, you'll be resentful because you're at a low energy level. Like, if you want to look at something really cool, look at what's called the emotional frequency chart. And it shows the frequencies of all the different emotions. And the low emotions down here are like shame and guilt, and and then you have anger, which is one of the it's the highest of the low emotions, right? And it's why guys will move into anger, okay? Because they're down here in this place that feels so bad that they'll move into anger to try to like motivate themselves to get out of it, but then they usually go back into this loop. But when you're on these low frequencies, these low states, these low energies, that's all you see. So if you're in this low energy, you haven't worked out, you haven't put any good information into your mind, right? You haven't spent any time around good men, okay? You're gonna come and you're gonna meet up with your wife, and you're down here and she's up here. How do you think that's gonna go? It's not gonna go well, right? But when you're up here and you're able to come in and let her crash upon you, and you just smile and you're doing the dishes and you're helping out with the kids, and she's looking at you like, oh my God, you're amazing. How do you do this? You're like, yeah, I invested in myself first.
Yeah.
So that I can come here and I can show up powerfully, right? We don't do that as men because we don't realize, coming back to the learned helplessness, okay, wake up, get some coffee, go to work, don't even eat breakfast, go and, just
sacrifice.
And in the back of your mind, you're like, man, I would like to do this, this, and this, and this. And then you come home, and then you got to deal with the children and the wife and this and that, whatever. And you didn't ever invest in yourself. And some men do that for years or decades, forever. So instead, if you flip it and you go, okay, well, let's say work starts at 8 o'clock. Well, I could get up at 5, and I've got 3 hours to invest in myself.
Right.
And you think, well, I won't be able to sleep in as much. You'd be surprised that if you give yourself an hour or two, even if you have to sacrifice it from your sleep, what will happen with your energy levels? Because you're going to drop the weight, you're going to get shredded and jacked, you're going to be healthy, your energy is going to go through the roof. Your ability just to like think through things and work through things, it's it's a perception thing. Like we're always fighting for perception or perspective, okay? And when you raise your energy levels up, let's say your problems are right here. When you wake up in the morning, you're down here. Don't even think about looking at your problems until you've raised your energy level. Well, how do you do that? You get up, and you start working. Like me, I go right into some breath work and hydration. So I'll drink a bunch of water and I start doing some breath work. So I oxygenate, I get the water. So I'm like, boom, I jack it up to here. Okay. I start to like visualize the day. I start to smile, like think about what's going on, to keep going. Then I go and get the plunge and I'm like, boom, right? So pretty soon I'm equal with my problems, right? I go to the gym and I hit the gym and pretty soon I'm looking at my problems like, whatever. But you're down here and you're looking at your problems when you first wake up in the morning, everything seems insurmountable when you first wake up in the morning, right?
It's almost like that. Is that the same idea of stacking wins that I've heard you talk about?
Exactly.
Tell me about that.
That's exactly what it is. It's these Brian Johnson's like to call them plus ones. It's all these things that you learn that you like to do. And a lot of the ones that I teach people, they're very universal, but everybody has things that they, might do that's a little bit different, but things that give you energy. But when you wake up in the morning, breath work is one, meditation is one, cold is one, like I said, hydration is one. Exercise, and that can be anything, right? For anybody, just moving your body, even if it's just getting up and walking, right?
I feed my horses.
Yes, feed your horses. Get outside. Get sun in your eyes. That's so powerful. Get sun in your eyes. Grounding. Get outside. Get your feet on the earth, or use a PEMF mat to ground yourself, which changes the way that your cells that orient to each other so that they can oxygenate faster. There's all these things that you can do that are stacking wins, and then you move into your business, your personal life, all these other areas, and you just come at them like with everything you got because you have it. But if you don't, you just wake up and you're just like, and you just move into it, and it takes you until noon for you even feel decent.
Right.
Instead of being like you're at Mach 3 by the time 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock runs by, and people are like, gee, Mike, you're in a really good mood. It's like, yeah, because I spent 3 hours getting here.
Yeah, right.
By putting the time in.
And is that because, and you had talked about, male mental health in general, which I just think it's so important too, that people remove the stigma from that and start talking more openly about male mental health, especially. Yeah. But you had mentioned, I'm going to forget your exact words, but that it's related to, you called it helplessness.
Learned helplessness.
Helplessness. So walk me through the connection between stacking wins and avoiding learned helplessness. It seems to me like there's some parallels there where when you're stacking some wins, and in context right now, we're talking in the sense of a morning routine or whatever, but you're stacking wins. It seems like you're also taking some control. Am I understand? Like that's exactly and what that's how they're tying in together.
Yes. You're taking control of the things you have control over. So if you think you have control over your wife and your children and the world, you got another thing coming. You have influence, and hopefully you're being a positive influence, but control, the things that you can control, like that, and it on a subconscious level. You're not being as active as you need to be. Right? When you look in the mirror and you're just like, oh man, like, look at that gut, look at that, that extra fat, look at the, you just know. And you're trying to talk yourself or justify like why, whatever, but So when you start doing the things that you need to do, like you feel good about that. And we all know that on a certain level, okay? So you start to get some basic ones, and then you'll start to get to ones that you'll start to like make it your own. Because not everybody wants to go out and get in cold water like I do. But guess what? You can walk in, splash cold water on your face from the sink, and that does something. Okay? It's not getting in 38-degree cold plunge, but it's something. Okay? You can take a bowl of water and put ice cubes in it from your refrigerator, and you can put your face in it, okay? There's so many things that you can do. And we're talking in the context of men and males, but it's because, like we said, we're men and males, and I can relate with it. A lot of this is universal.
Yeah.
And women can do this too. Females can do this too. But
and in fact, for what it's worth, women, I think, especially moms, even, you talk about a challenging stigma between like self-care, like mothers taking care of themselves versus their kids, and how challenging that is.
Yes.
I think it's worth mentioning that conceptually, all of this still applies. Any mothers listening, you've got to take care of themselves first.
Absolutely.
Also.
And us as men, we have the responsibility, Like, think about this. Like, you come home from work, and if you're on fire because if you've invested in yourself already, you come home and you go, babe, I'll take the kids. You go to the spa. You go to the gym. You go, and then she can be like, what? Really?
And now all of a sudden your marriage is better.
Yeah.
Your relationship with your kids are better. And that's
and you're loving it. So you're not like begrudgingly hanging out with your kids. You're like, man, we're going to go to the park.
It doesn't feel like a sacrifice. Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting, because I'm kind of weaving these themes in of, that tendency to, I don't know. And I think if you look at some of that stuff, the responsibilities of life, male, female, dad, mom, husband, wife, whatever, responsibilities of life. If you look at it at that lens of sacrificing, it's got a negative connotation to it. Now you're drained. Now you're tired.
Yeah.
Whatever. But to your point, I love that example because I'm so far from perfect. But there are times when I'm coming home and I'm feeling great and I want my wife to take care of herself. And, I want to, and you now get to do the things you need to do, and it doesn't feel like a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And that's when, like,
because you feel good.
Powerful.
Because you feel good. Like when it's like when you have money and you can give money to the people you love, because you have more of it. And you're like, hey, and you watch, your kids, or you watch people go out and like do something fun with it. So it's like that. You're giving these gifts to the people that you love, right? One of the guys that I follow, his name's Kyle Carnahan, Superhuman Father, is just an amazing person that's just creating this movement. And he has a phrase that I just repeat all the time that I love, man. He says, as men, we do the most and we need the least. Is that true? Not necessarily at all, right? There's a lot of badass women out there, okay? But guess what? When you say that to yourself, you come home and you're tired and you go, nope, I'm a man. I do the most and I need the least. And then you go in and you give the most. Well, there's a law in the universe that the more you give, the more you get.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's a universal law, right? When you put in, it has to come out. It might not come from your wife. It might come from something else. But the more you put in, the more you're going to get out, right? So when you do that, you come home and you're just like, man, like that's more. You're building your self-confidence, your self-worth up more. I'm building this family. I'm building my children. I'm building my wife up. I'm helping. But you only have the ability to do that if you invested in yourself first, right? So guys are always like, I'll do it when I get home. It's like, no, you won't. I'm telling you right now, like your likelihood of doing this stuff when you get home is almost zero. Like I practiced this for so many years. It just doesn't have the same punch. You got to do it first thing in the morning. Like it is absolutely imperative. It doesn't have to be intense and it doesn't have to be like massively long like mine has a tendency to be because I'm a practitioner and I do this. So I'm running through these things and trying these things so that I can show people. It can be a short 15, 20, 30-minute routine, right? How hard would it be to go out to the stop sign and run sprints for 15 minutes? That is intense. 15 minutes, 5 minutes, right? Max burpees. It takes less than 15 minutes to do 100 burpees. And if anybody's done 100 burpees, that's no joke, right?
Right.
So people like you got to get into this thing where you set up this system and then you start playing the game of like we said, stacking wins, right? It's like, what can I do? How can I scale it? Because like you said, all of a sudden, your kid comes in, your wife has an emergency. Oh, crap. Well, now I don't want to get in a bad mood because now they've interrupted my routine. It's like, okay, well, what can I do in 15 minutes? What can I do in 5 minutes? What can I do in a half an hour or whatever? Like,
I was telling you about it off camera, but it's been so cool. My dad, we're in my dad's basement right now as we speak, but it's been so fun to see. He started, and he commutes to Salt Lake City every day. Mm-hmm. He's got a demanding job. He probably works 60 hours a week with a 2-hour commute every day. I mean, if there was ever I don't have the time and it was valid, he would fit that.
Yeah.
He started several months ago just prioritizing it, committing to it. And 5 a.m. club, he's waking up at 5, getting in his cold plunge, and then he runs 3 miles every morning before he goes to work. And it's been so cool for me and this is leading up to a follow-up question, but first of all, it's just been so amazing for me to see. And at a later stage in life, to then reprioritize himself has been very inspiring to watch.
Yeah.
But then it's been fun because, I'm training for this ultra marathon, and by nature of that, sometimes my runs have been incredibly early in the morning. And so we'll film each other and be like, hey, 5 a.m. club, it's snowing out, it's cold, and we can send it back to each other. And it's just so cool because you get to sort of, I don't know, feed off of that. Mm-hmm. And that's what I was going to ask you. But the question I'm leading up to is, talk to me about community. Talk to me about, social, how important connection and social community and things like that are with all of this. Cause I do think sometimes people have a tendency in it. And to preface it a little bit, I think struggle is lonely, right? And we've talked about the stigma, especially in the fire service and wherever it is, when, that like we need less and we give more. Sometimes that's dangerous, I think, because you can just be like, I've got this. Like I'm going to bottle it in. I've got it. I'm on a mission personally to love loud and, I don't know. And well, the other concept that is bringing me to here is you talked about money and, being able to give that out. There's that idea that discipline is freedom. If you're disciplined with your money, you can have freedom with your money. If you're disciplined with your health, you can have freedom with your health. If you're disciplined with your mental well-being, you can be, things like that. My point is, and then you have talked about, I forgot your words now. Basically like, what you aspire to and then share it. I forget how.
Acquire what you admire and then give it away.
Admire and give it away.
And those aren't my words. Those are Wes Watson's words. He actually came up with that. I want to make sure that that he has
acquire what you admire and give it away. For my dad and I, pretty cool to like know that we're an 8-hour drive from each other, but we're in it together.
Yeah.
At 5 a.m., it's snowing out. We're sharing it. And obviously I have a bond with my dad. He's my dad. But I think that is so overlooked how important this is. You and I cold plunging together.
Yeah.
Struggling together, thriving together. I would love to hear your perspective and your thoughts on where community and, the doing it together, how that ties in with all of this.
First off, mad props to your dad. To change that later on in life is spectacular, especially to do something like that's that hard.
Right.
So that is, and obviously just seeing what he's created here is very impressive. So respect to your dad. Also, when it comes to community, okay, I remember when I was younger and I remember thinking, oh man, there's starving children in Africa. I remember thinking that. And somebody brought it to my attention. All right, well, what are you going to do about it? I'm like, well, I guess I could give money or I could go over there, whatever. He's like, okay, but here's the thing is, we have a tendency to do that. We want to go places where we can't really do anything. But guess what? You can make a difference right here, right now, right? With what you have, with the people that are in your life, there's somebody that needs you and you don't even realize it most likely, right? So be aware of who is watching you. The main reason I stopped drinking was I had a nephew who we just got done going down a river trip, and he went down on my back. He was 8 years old at the time. He went down on my back on this Weber River. It was a tubing trip. It was awesome. And then we went to this grill afterwards, and we were all having a good time. And it was that time I was like, I think I was late 20s, and I had a beer, and my nephew was sitting behind me. And he was watching me, and he knew that I was into health and fitness, okay? But he couldn't understand why I was drinking this thing that he couldn't have. So he asks, he pulls on my sleeve, and he says, "Mike, Uncle Mike, why can't I have what you're having?" And I was like, there it is. I didn't realize, like I said earlier, you don't realize because you're doing shit for you most of the time. And you don't realize, all of a sudden you realize that like the people you're doing it for, it's even more important. So that's why you put it into you first, and then you start with the people that are closest to you, and then you start to spiral out, and you spiral out, and you're building capacity, and you get the people around you good, and then you get your family good, and then you get your neighborhood and your community good, and then you get the point where you get your state, and that's how it works. You can't just go out and go over to Africa and save 1,000 starving children. You have to have resources and power and all this stuff to do that. You got to earn the opportunity to do that. So you got to start with you. You got to take your power back, your control back, morning routine, so you can help your family and then go and you can spiral out like that. That's where, and community is everything. Like you said, when you start to feel, like as men, we have a tendency to not feel, because we have to put our head down and we have to work, right? And we need to be able to shut off our emotions for that, right? There's a time and place for that.
For sure.
Right? But there's also a time and place to open up our hearts and to keep our hearts open, right? To be able to feel the pain of other people and to be able to realize that we have a responsibility in that. to be able to just be our best selves, because that's the only way other people learn. We want to go out and tell people what to do. Hey, you know what, you should do this and you should, but if you just go do it, if you just lead and people go, Mike just did this. You know, he just hit 7% and he bought himself a watch because he hit 7% body fat. Well, if he can do it, I can do it, right? That's what we're telling people. Look, I'm just a firefighter. I'm a normal dude, right? I broke emotionally. I didn't have the tools. I learned the tools. I'm developing the tools. I'm helping give the tools away, right? I'm helping with my nephews. I'm helping with everybody in my family. I'm helping with people online. Like, that's what I'm building up. I'm building my community and spiraling out.
Right.
So yes, start with yourself. Start with your, the people that are closest to you, and spiral out.
Love that. Is that why because you've had a progression that and I don't know you well. I've been following you on Instagram for a year or so.
Yeah.
But there's definitely, it seems like, and especially hearing more of your story, that there's been sort of this progression of, you'd mentioned normal guy breaking down, or, whatever, however you want to call it, working on yourself now, feeling like we're at a position to help others. Is that seeing sort of that concept in practice? Is that what we're getting to experience with how, because what I'm curious about is the transition from you struggling, finding the tools, and then, this shift into, because I've only known you from the coaching perspective.
Yeah.
So walk me through that and the path there of when you realized that this is working and maybe we can help others. What was what was the driving factor behind that, and how did you pursue that?
God, I think it's just seeing people hurt. Like at the fire department, because people ask me all the time, Mike, what's the worst thing that you ever seen? As a firefighter, and you're a firefighter. We've seen some really wicked stuff, and they never. I always catch them off guard when I say, what the worst thing is when you go on somebody who's lost, let's say, a child or a family member. It's not how they died, no matter how gruesome that is. It's looking into their eyes and seeing the hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is something you'll never get over. Like, you just don't realize, like, you're able, it's this transfer of energy, and you see that and you think to yourself, well, maybe if I do something and I'm able to be this person, that I can get to this person over here before they get to that place to where they take their life, or they get in an accident, or they have a heart attack. Because when they say, Mike, he was just alive 5 minutes ago. Like, that is the type of stuff. When you see family members that are going through stuff, and you're thinking to yourself, like, if I was better, I could help. If I had more skill sets in certain areas, if I was stronger, I could help. Like, seeing people that you love hurt, that is my driving force.
Yeah.
Like, ultimately, like, that is my driving force. And like you said you heard a quote, and it is actually my favorite definition of hell. And that is when you die and the person you are meets the person you could have been.
Right.
That is my definition of hell. And I want to make sure that gap is pretty damn small. And like, regret is my ultimate fear. And so when we have when we have the capability to reach our potential, and we're not reaching that, like, that's what creates that suffering. So as we go through life, we are going to experience lots of trauma and suffering. And if we get the opportunity to use that to learn. But guess what? A lot of people, what they do is they just become traumatized or victimized to that. It's a choice. You can feel sorry for yourself, and you can have that aspect. But when you go, you know what? I've been through some really messed up shit, and I'm going to learn from this so I can help somebody else, that they don't have to go through that as deep as I did or as hard as I did. If I can help them, avoid that kind of pain that I went through, like, that's what it's about to me. You take all these things that you're experiencing in your life, and you turn them into wins.
Yeah.
And that takes sitting in the pain and growing from them, because pain can just traumatize people. Like, you see it all the time. People just get traumatized by it because they don't sit in it long enough. They don't, like, go get help. They don't reach out. They don't read books. They don't have a support group. They don't have anything to help them move through that pain enough to where they can actually grow from it, right? It's like me when I went through and I didn't have any tools. I was traumatized so badly that my nervous system broke. And so when you have tools to deal with stuff, then life comes out and hits you with that punch that you don't see coming, and you hit the ground and you're just like, yeah, that hurt, but guess what? I got tools.
Right.
And I'm going to get back up and, watch what happens, right? I'm going to come back. And then it's cool because then guess what? Guess who's watching? All your people are watching. They're like, oh shit, Mike just got knocked to the ground. What's he going to do? What's he going to do? And he's like, is he going to get up? And then like, oh shit, he's getting up. He's, because they're rooting for you, but they're silently rooting for themselves, because we're all going through this stuff and we're looking for people and things and experiences to help us get through that. So when you're able to be vulnerable and tell people, like people are like, Mike, you've mastered mental toughness. And I just laugh. I'm like, are you serious? I'm like, it keeps coming. It doesn't matter how good you get. It keeps coming, and it's going to keep coming, and it's going to get harder and harder. And that's it. It's just levels until you die. But it's great. Because you get to experience that. And like we talked about the distinctions of sacrifice. If you go through sacrifice thinking, all I do is sacrifice for all my loved ones, and I don't get any,
and no one appreciates me.
If you think about it like that, or I get to sacrifice all this for this, and I get to watch the smiles on the people that I love.
Yeah.
Right? I have earned that. I get to have that. What else is there? Right? To see your people and your loved ones just smiling and just looking at you with respect. I went through a divorce. I got divorced 2 years ago, and I had the opportunity to be married to a woman for 15 years, and we were and are still best friends. And she told me, how much she respects and loves me still. And I'm like, that is that is the biggest accomplishment I've ever made in my life, to be able to go through something like that with somebody and to come out of it and to have her perspective of me
right.
to be that. Because so many people go through go through a marriage and divorce and then just come out and there's so much hatred and so much anger and so much hurt and all this stuff because people don't grow. They don't take these opportunities to truly grow and to truly love people. When you just love people, it changes you and it changes everybody around you.
Yeah. So you brought up an interesting thought. So speaking of like trauma responses and, the ability to deal with it, and I don't know if it's fact or not, but there's a story that goes that buffalo, when a storm comes, cattle and every other animal runs away from the storm. Buffalo turn towards the storm, face it, and run into it, which is at the moment exponentially scarier, but the end result is that you get through the storm faster. You're in the storm less. Because you've talked about a few times now of, that our pain is telling us something. We have to sit with it. You're not sitting with it long enough, processing. Mm-hmm. You've mentioned those things multiple times. I had my friend Sean Arocha on the podcast a while back, and we talked about this same idea of sitting with our traumas and processing them. And then I'm running the Buffalo Run 100 on Friday. So I've been using that as kind of I've been using it as a real life example of a metaphor of something I'm trying to do, right?
Yeah.
Of so in my fire service days and firefighting and EMT and all that, seeing the same stuff anybody has seen.
Yeah.
For some reason, my anxiety has translated and triggered when I'm in adventurous situations. Why? No idea. So I'm facing it head on, and now I run ultras.
Yeah.
but I just think it's a cool analogy and a cool thing to think about, because sometimes I think people have a tendency, and especially in the context of the fire service or wherever, but sometimes people can let their traumas harden them and then wear that as a badge of honor. Like, that I've been through some stuff and now I have these trauma responses and I'm hardened and I'm bitter and I'm angry at the world.
Yeah.
And it's because of that. And it's almost like a protection mechanism. In a lot of ways, I think that it's sort of like the cattle turning from the storm and running away, and now the storm's staying with you and it's stormy all the time.
Yeah.
I'm curious. And then, you've also talked about, I don't know, I'm going to call it masculinity from a place of love.
Yeah.
What's harder, avoiding the trauma and turning and running with the storm, or turning and facing it? What's your advice to your clients and, the people that you get to coach? Because, it's a lot like getting in that cold water. It's certainly easier not to. Is it easier in the long term though, to not do the work? And that's what I'm kind of curious your perspective on, of like being vulnerable and putting in the work versus, the alternative trauma responses and things like that. I'd love to hear your insight on that.
All right, there's a lot to unpack here, but let me see if I can simplify a few of these points, okay? So you talked about the trauma and when people are kind of bitter towards things that happen to them in life and they stay in that place, okay? I think that's all based off of hurt that hasn't been processed and healed correctly. So people are talking a lot of stuff about toxic masculinity lately. And toxic masculinity, in my opinion, is masculinity that hasn't healed.
Agreed.
So hurt people, okay? So when you get hurt and you stay down in those low vibrations, okay, the way that the brain works is that you can only have access to the memories that are on that level of the state that you're in. So if you're in anger, you're going to think back and you're going to recall all of the memories that pissed you off. And that's what you have access to it. And then there's something called the RAS, the reticular activating system, and it's a part of the brain that says what's important. So whatever is on your mind intensely like that, you're going to start looking for it. And what's even scarier is you're going to see it.
Interesting.
You're going to see it. So you're going to see stuff that justifies your point and your opinion and your point of view. So you're going to sit there and self-justify everything that you're doing, and you're going to make everybody else around you miserable. So to me, it comes back to like, what's the point? Like, what are you trying to do? Like, for me, it's about self-growth and it's about serving my people.
Yeah.
So if I can take something that happens and I can make it so that I can use it. All right, let me give you a metaphor, okay? My coach, I'm going to give you guys a tool, okay? My coach, my first mental toughness coach, he gave me this brilliant tool that's worth thousands. It's worth everything that I paid for this, which is about the cost of a small car, okay? And it's called catch, own, and replace. Okay? So first off, you got to be aware of the thoughts that come into your mind, okay? They come into your mind and they're so fast that you don't even realize that you're thinking them, okay? And there's a formula. It goes thoughts, feelings, actions, results. Okay, thoughts lead to feelings lead to actions lead to your results. But it's actually like more of a circle because your results are going to give you similar thoughts. And then you're going to go in this cycle. But it's
Feedback
even worse
loops.
than that. Guess what? It either goes up spiral or down spiral. Okay, this is what suicide is. Okay, so catch your thoughts. What are you thinking that's making you feel a certain way? Okay, then you realize, oh, well, I'm feeling this way, so it's going to make me act this way and so on and so forth. So catch those feelings. Own. There's two parts to own. Understand that only you can make you feel the way you're feeling. Nobody outside you can make you feel that way. Okay, so then there's a second part to the ownership, and that is that it's all about perspective. We're talking about perspective. So in a square room, there's a mathematical way to find the center of the room. Let's say the center of the room is truth. Okay, now I have this truth. Let's say I'm holding up a book, and we're saying that the book is the truth. I'm looking at the front of the book, you're looking at the back of the book, and I start to define the front of the book. And I'm like, hey, the truth is this. And you're like, no, it's not. And you're talking. So we're saying the same thing, we're looking at the same thing, but we're describing it in a completely different way. That's called perspective. Now, people want to be right or wrong. Guess how many ways there are to get to the center of the room or the truth? Almost unlimited.
Right.
So the question then becomes not who's wrong or right, because that's a stupid question, right? It's what will serve me, what will serve you. So how can I look at this thing that's happening in a way that will serve me for what I want?
Yeah.
Okay? And the last part is the part where the work comes in, okay? Which is replace. Replace that thought or that perspective with something that's better or higher. You can also say upgrade. That's the tool. But you get into a situation that you have to do that, and all of a sudden you just react, and then you go, oh, man. Then you go, I didn't really do that very well. And then you go, okay, next time I'm going to do it better. So maybe it took you 4 hours to catch on and replace. Right? And then all of a sudden it took you 30 minutes, and then it took you 30 seconds. And then pretty soon you're getting to the point where somebody says something, pisses you off, all of a sudden you reframe it, and you come right back at it, and you're just using everything that comes at you in life for something that serves you.
Right.
People want to take stances on things, and you're like, do you really want to take that stance? Because it really doesn't serve you. And when you learn these things, these distinctions, these tools, this is why I'm such a big fan of them, then you can progress.
Yeah.
And when you progress, then you can help somebody else progress. And if I was to sum stuff up, the reason why we feel like crap is because we're regressing. We're not progressing. So when we start to backslide or go backwards, okay, we're not moving forwards, it makes us feel icky inside. And all of a sudden you start to realize, oh, it's because I'm regressing, I'm not progressing. Well, what is progressing, right? The routine we're talking about, right? Helping, growing, you're moving. Even going for a walk stimulates moving forward. That's why when you go for a walk, it feels better because it tells your brain, hey, I'm moving past stuff, right? So if you learn catch on replace, you go for a walk and you go, okay, my wife said this, kind of made me mad. You know what? But what about this? What if I thought about it on her perspective and I did this and I did, oh, okay. And then you come back with a big smile and you go, you know what, babe? And then she's like, what happened to you? You just went on a walk. Yeah, because I have a tool. I work through things. I came back with a different perspective. And now we're gonna level up and we're gonna do things better.
So that's how, because you had talked about like fire stuff, and you see the terrible thing, you see the pain. What I think is beautiful about that is that if there are tools in place to see that stuff and then turn around and still think the world can be beautiful, to still think that like we can make a difference,
absolutely,
and that we can, and even if it's tiny, even if it's to our nephew or the guy who's bunking next to you or whatever.
Who's to say that it's tiny? That's the thing is we always downplay these things. Like, well, it's just my nephew, or it's just this, or I want to go over to Africa and save children, and
that's such a good point.
But if you can literally say something that could save your nephew's life down the road.
Right.
So like we got to quit downplaying those things, because something that's said in the right timing or context can make all the difference in somebody's life completely. I've talked to so many people that are like, I did this because my uncle said this to me. And I'm like, we don't realize that people are watching, that people are relying on us to do the right thing. And when I say the right thing, I mean that in the way that if we just choose the higher thing,
right?
Because we always are, we're always choosing lower or higher all day long, right? And we know when we do it, but if we just are practicing doing the higher thing, and aiming high, and even if we make mistakes, coming back and admitting our mistakes faster, like people ask me after I've been through such, I don't want to use the term traumatic, but really hard relationship issues, especially lately. They're like, well, what have you learned from this? And I said, initially I thought, I'll never love again. There's no way. Like I was hurting so bad that I thought there is no way that I'll love again. And I flipped it. And I said, you know what? Not only would I love again, I will love harder, deeper, and faster.
That's scary.
It is scary. And it should be scary, because guess what? Love is always a risk.
Yeah.
And everything that's worthwhile in this world is a risk.
Right.
Like you are risking hard. And, like right now, like I'm looking for my true queen, and I'm on this mission to find her. And I'm going to find her by virtue of me becoming the best version of myself. And I got a little frustrated, and I was talking to our boy Schaefer, and I was and he looked at me and he said, Mike, you think that the most important person in your life is just going to be handed over to you without work, without struggle? And I started laughing. I was like, bro.
Dang it.
Ooh, that's good, man. And so when you surround yourself, once again, everybody, they look to me, but then you surround yourself with equally great people, and then they throw stuff back at you like that, and you're just like, I'm so glad you're my friend.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that that I'm with you and I'm spending time around you. And when you're around people like that, like good people, they hold you. Like my ex-wife, oh my God, I love her so much. I'll start talking to her and she'll be like, and she will reflect back my value, and then she will hold me to the highest possible standard. And I'm just like, damn it, she's right. And I'm like, God, I love you for that, And then
it's the worst, but I love you for it.
But well, you know how it is, because when you want to be right, that's the ego. But then you realize that somebody who's smarter than you is right, and you're just like, and you accept it, and then you're like, wow, thank you, right? And if you can come to that place faster and let go of the ego, and you can learn and grow faster, because you feel it. It's this resistance. There's a guy, Phil Stutz, one of the best psychiatrists in the world. He calls it part X. There's that part of you that's always going to resist what you need to do. Yeah. Always. No matter how good, no matter how perfect you have this process it needs to be, there's always you got this perfect formula to make $1 million, and then this side of you goes, I don't want to.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. I don't know if I want to get in the cold water. I don't know if I want to start this business. You know what I mean? So you're always going to fight that part X, right? And if you know that it's there, then you're like, oh, I see you. And I tell people, I said, I've developed it. If you know who David Goggins is, right? Of course. You know how he has that internal dialogue and he talks to himself all the time? I'm getting that way too. I'm getting a point where the other day I wake up at 5 a.m., non-negotiable. And I wake up and I'm like, oh man, I could really go back. I could really use another 30 minutes of sleep. And I literally started to go back to sleep. And I heard a voice in my mind say, are you serious? Are you really going to do that?
That's not what we do.
Literally heard another voice say that. Get up, you bitch. Like, I literally heard somebody else in my mind talking to me. I've started to develop that David Goggins. Like, instead of Mike Garrick, it's Garrick talking to me, right?
Right.
Yeah, and it's neat because when you start to develop this, you have these things that start to unfold, and it starts to take over like a habit. And once you stack these wins that you've done down here, then you can stack more and more, and you can that capacity gets higher and higher. And then, like you said, is pretty soon you're running a full-time business and you have a successful family and you're raising great kids and
start a podcast.
Starting a podcast, and meeting people in Heber, Utah.
Yeah, making them get in cold water and all that. Like, dang it.
And, who knows what we're going to be doing next.
It's interesting. So, Instagram culture and kind of social media and stuff. There sometimes can be a time when morning routines are poked fun at.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know. There's over and over examples of people that are maybe some people over exaggerate it, or I've seen clips of influencers talking about their morning routine, and it's like, okay, that's a little, maybe it's real, maybe it's not. Who knows? Others make fun of it or whatever. What I'm hearing from you though is that it's not about it's not about the morning routine. It's about what the routine represents. And it's about what it allows you to do after and the rest of your life. We had also talked about how, I had mentioned that it's small impacts, on those around us. And I love, and I'm so grateful that you corrected me on that who's to say it's small. Love that, because it could be enormous. Without being too, Instagram sensationalized, sincere question.
Yeah.
Is it safe to say that following the process with the morning routine, controlling the controllables, removing yourself from that, why am I forgetting what you call it? The not having
learned helplessness.
Helplessness, not selflessness, helplessness can change the world. Is that a fair statement?
100%. Like, think about it. You literally are changing the world every day, like by your presence. Like, your presence is the present. Like, that's what people don't get. Like, life is an energy transfer. If I showed up today and was like, hey, Ben, like, what's going on? Like, if I didn't show up with a presence, right? If I didn't show up with all of my life's experiences, if I didn't show up with that power, I'm not going to have the impact. So when you pour into yourself and you learn, and everybody has this, people, I'm not Mike, I'm not Ben, I'm just fill in the blank. I'm just a mom. I'm just this. That is ridiculous. Every one of those roles are so important, and you have to own that role, and you have to step into it. And you can make. I watched this guy. There's this guy down in who's quite famous. His name's Steve Hardison, and he's known as the ultimate coach down in Arizona. And this guy has got a name for himself because of how he is. And I went down and spent 4 hours with him and just watched him how he is in public. And I was like, holy shit, I get it now. Because he was just unchained. Like he just was like, he had no problem going up and just loving on people. And like, he would just, pop the trunk. He had a Porsche. He popped the trunk of his Porsche and he had like 30 books of all of his clients. And he's giving out books and he's having conversations and he's connecting with people and he's helping people. Like, if somebody's car's broken down, he's like, oh, sweet, this is an opportunity. And I'm like, wow, just the way he lived, right? So we have an opportunity to do that. That's this up here, okay? And now we're like, okay, I know I can get there, and I keep pushing myself. The plus ones, the morning routines, the daily routines, all the education, the things you're learning about marketing and running and all this stuff. It's driving us up to be the best possible person we can be at the time, right? So you are literally changing the world every step of the way. Every post that you're doing, and there's a caveat to that, and this is what I'm starting. This is where you were saying that my content is starting to change. It's because I'm becoming more authentic and more vulnerable. I'm trying to get on and be like, look.
It shows.
I'm like, look, like, I'm struggling, and I struggle, and it's that struggle that you push past and move past and show people, look, man, like this hurts. I'm struggling and you can struggle too. If I can do it, you can do it, right? And the morning routine thing, when people get on there, it's because sometimes we all do this. We switch in and out of this like, oh, look at me, right? Which is self-actualization. Look at me. Look what I'm doing. This is cool. I'm badass. I'm getting in 38-degree water, look at, But if you get into it and you're like, man, like I had a really rough night, last night, I had a fight with my wife, this and this. I'm dealing with I'm battling some depression, some anxiety. I'm getting in here to show you guys what happens and that you guys can do it too.
Love that.
Like I know that you guys are dealing with the same shit that I'm dealing with. I'm no better than you. I'm not talking down to you guys. I go to higher ground so I can call you guys to higher ground and be like, Ben, it's badass up here, bro. You got to get up here, man. Come on. And then I reach down and I'm reaching down to pull you back up, right? With the tools and with the information, all the stuff that I'm doing. So the intention of the posts of like, I'm intentionally loving on people. I want to love on people, but I can't love on people if I don't build that up. I'm telling you, man, like this is the secret. Like if you don't build yourself up, you can't do it. That's not to say that even when you're super low, that you don't have anything. Like, no matter where you're at, you have something.
Yeah.
Okay. There was this guy who studied suicide notes. Okay. And I don't remember how many it was. It was ridiculous. And can you imagine, like studying suicide notes? Wow. We've seen some suicides. And he read, after studying them and reading them all the letters that these people met, he goes, there was a commonality. And it was, I just don't feel like I make a difference. So he came up with this saying, and it is that difference is the meaning. Meaning is the difference it makes. If it makes no difference, then it has no meaning. So in other words, and I'm not sure if I said that right. I may have messed that up. But my point is that you can always add meaning by making a difference.
Yeah.
Okay. So how is that? No matter where you're at, you can do something.
Hold the door open.
Hold the door open.
Change the tire.
Smile, right? Pick up some
compliment.
trash, right? Like talk to somebody. Like it is insane like how much difference you can make just by like doing something.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden that takes you, like I said, you may be a -10 because you're such a bad place, right? Well, you go from a -10
-8
to a -8, -6. Pretty soon you're at a 0 and you're like, this isn't so bad. And then next day you drop back down to -8 because you got to keep, because you want to build it to where what's the term? Higher highs and higher lows.
Yeah.
Like you want to go like this.
You want to elevate
right?
your baseline.
Yes, elevate your baseline. And the only way you can do that is through capacity and through learning and through really, really hard stuff, both physically, mentally, emotionally, relationally, like all of it. Here I am over here and I'm shredded and I've got abs. And then all of a sudden like, oh, I'm not doing well in my relationships. Okay. So I got to build up my emotional stamina in this area, which means I got to learn about people and I got to learn about like women and how to treat women right and how to be the best mate that I possibly can be. And like that takes a lot of time and effort and you got to pour into that. And then your intentions got to be right. And so you go through all this stuff, right? And then the person that you come out, like goals, people talk about goals, and goals are important, and it's important to set goals that are just out of your reach not because of the goal. It's the person you have to become to accomplish that. Like when you're doing these ultra marathons, all the training that you're doing to add up to that and the person you got to become is the reward. The race, you're going to do it and it's going to be cool, and then you're going to be, that was cool. But that person that you became, you have that for life.
It's so funny that you say that because before you went there, I was going to say, that's why I have to run 100 miles on Friday because, this evolution thing. But I was telling my wife, it's a challenge for me right now because training for that has been a tremendous commitment time-wise and physically. I'm battling injuries and whatever. But I'm loving who it's turned me into. Like I'm calm. I'm leveled. I have a different perspective. I'm patient. I'm look good. I'm thin and all that stuff. But it's interesting that idea of like doing those things, who you turn into along the way and how much that matters. But I also love that idea of, impact and if it matters and, that whole idea. I think I've got a good friend. His name's Chacho, Robel Taylor. He's my branding guy. He's brilliant. He lives in Dallas and he says all the time, and he's very open about it on Instagram, when you need help, help others. And I say all the time, selfish service It's a lot of the reason why I'm a volunteer firefighter. I do it for me.
Yeah.
I love the fact that I get to help others. I love the camaraderie and I love the adrenaline, and there's other things.
Yeah.
It's also hard.
Yeah.
You know, I also have traumas from it and have to deal with my anxiety from it and whatever. But that idea of like, if you're at a -10, finding anything, finding that first win, whether it's getting in cold water or holding open the door for the lady or call your grandma, you know, give her a compliment, like whatever. Those little things create momentum.
Yeah.
And then you can do another one and you've got emotional energy for the next one and the next one and the next one. And I just think it's so cool how all of this ties in together. And I've said forever that the most direct path to a fulfilling life is through service of others, through helping out other people. And to think though that can be applied, you know, if you're Mike Garrick or, you know, the guy that's at the -10 and struggling, like it comes back to my original question of, can a morning routine really change the world? Of course it can, because we're all impacting the world.
Yeah.
Every interaction we have impacts somebody. You know, those times at the grocery store where, you know, the checkout clerk or whatever, you know, those little interactions that I think people overlook that they're more meaningful than you realize, because we're humans and we're in it together.
Yeah.
And like lifting each other up, no matter how subtly, then it lifts you up a little more, then you can lift up people.
Yeah.
You get this tremendous, you know, like you said, spiral upward.
Yeah.
I love reframing that and thinking about that it does change the world.
Yeah. Well, think about what you just said, okay? So coming back, does a morning routine change the world, okay? Well, the morning routine, or any routine for that matter, is the first part, okay? It's the building you up. So if you stay in the building you up and you don't go out and give it away, then yeah, it doesn't really change the world, okay?
Yeah.
So you build yourself up and then you go out and you serve, whether that's your family, that's your job, whatever it is you do. But also we forget that, like you just said, no matter where we're at, right? If we're at Cafe Rio or anywhere, you can make a difference by how you treat other people, and how you treat other people is directly it's completely dictated by how you feel about yourself. So if you don't feel good, you're not going to do good. So when you're in that -10, it is brutally hard to be like, okay, I'm going to go and help others. Okay. But I remember when I was going through the hardest time, and I was telling you just the last several months. Okay. And I was in this place, and when you're hurting, it's like this, it's like you're like this.
Yeah.
Okay. You're in the pain. And that's all you can feel. And all of a sudden, like, it just came to me. Oh yeah. What is it that I want and need? Like, I need connection. Okay. I need to give connection away. So I have to give the very thing that I want from the world, or I want from whatever it is. So whatever you give away will come back to you. So if you need, that's part of what the whole self-awareness thing is. What do I need right now? What do I need right now? Oh, I need connection. Okay. Well, I have, how many people in my phone do I have? I can reach out and be like, man, I was thinking about you the other day, and I just wanted to say I'm proud of you for this, or, you know, or.
And isn't it crazy how powerful that is? I used to work retail early on, and there was a moment in my life that, like, it's a core memory. I don't know why. Luckily, I've been blessed with this ability to like observe stuff and then let it stick. A guy walked into the retail space, and my coworker complimented his shirt. It was a non-moment, but I saw it light the customer. I saw it change the demeanor of the person. And I remember thinking like, oh, holy crap, that was powerful. Like, I observed it from a little bit afar. I was, you know, check the register down and whatever. And it was just such a powerful moment of like, I don't know, that I wanted more of that. Like, I got to see a beautiful human interaction that made an impact on somebody that took hardly any energy from the other person. And it was just neat. And I just think, I don't know, the more of that stuff we can do, then we get filled back up, and you know, we can bring it back around. It's such a, I have loved this conversation, because it's so cool to be able to reframe how impactful we can be. And, you know, and that morning routines can literally change the world.
Pay attention too. Pay attention to the things, like you're just saying. Pay attention to the things that do that. Like, when you have a perfect day, why was it a perfect day?
Yeah.
Like, you have to understand yourself and what gives you happiness and gives you meaning. So it's like, why was it?
Or even moment.
Yes.
Did that moment make me feel better or worse?
Yeah.
then
Exactly.
I want more moments that make me feel better.
And like you said, is the secret is service. But once again, you serve better when you have skill sets,
Yeah.
when you have skills. So the more you build you up, the more you can serve, and the more you serve, the more it makes you feel good. So it's this perfect cycle and loop, right? And it seems so cliche when you start talking about it, but it's cliche just to talk about it. But when you do it, it's badass, right? When you go to the gym and you look good, and you go out and people are like, "Damn, like you look good," and you're like, "You know what? I look good, but guess what? Like I feel even better, so I can serve people, right?
Yeah.
Like, I have the capacity to be at a high level of energy and to walk in and to make influence on people, to make impact." Okay, and that's what about the body just comes. Like it's not like going and like, "Oh, check out my abs and like I look so good." It's like, no. This is just a result of going in there and being disciplined and like grinding. Like you say, when you're running and you're pushing your body, you look good, right? But it's nothing. Every single person that I respect in the gym, I go up and I'm like, why do you come to the gym all the time? And they're like,
my mind.
Every single one of them says it, right? And they all look good. That's the paradox of it, right? You're like, so the body's a reflection of the mind. And so when I see somebody that's not looking their best, I know that they're not their best up here. And there's nothing wrong with that as far as like people want to they want to attack themselves. And it's not about that. It's about being, like I said, it's about being self-aware and being like, look, I know what I need to do. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
Let's just do it. And then I'll feel better and I can serve higher. That's that simple. It's just levels, man. You don't have to go in there and call yourself names and have derogatory self-talk, like, yeah, if like you can have that and it can be positive, but I'm just saying like a lot of people get to the point where they have such negative self-images and they don't have to. It's like just be like, yeah, you know what, I'm a fat ass. Okay, cool. Let's go do something about it.
Yeah.
Right? And not only am I going to do something about it, I'm going to do something about it, and I'm going to bring my kids with, and my buddy's going to come with, and we're going to have this community of like, we're going to get stronger together, and we're helping each other. Well, then guess what? Now these people over here see it, and they're like, well, geez, if Joe down the street can do it, I can do it too, right? And then you're having a blast. You're outside doing cold plunges with your neighbors and doing walks with grandma, and you're just, man, it's just. And then what's the alternative, right? Being self-consumed with how do I feel about myself, and I'm not getting mine, and like I'm sacrificing everything, and I don't even have what I want. I don't got the car that Joe has down the street, or like it. That's the alternative that people slip into, right? But when you validate through the work, and you wake up and you're like, man, I woke up at 5 this morning and I crushed that chest workout. Look at my chest, is looking really good. Like a year ago, man, I was all flabby and stuff, but now look at my chest, and look at my kids they're all excited. They're like, look at dad, man, he looks good, and I'm proud to be. And so you just keep going with that, and you keep going with that. And it just unfolds so beautifully, man.
I love it. Mike, thank you so much. And it's a perfect segue because I have a gift for you.
Oh, man.
It's my tradition around here. But it's funny because it's so relevant with the conversation today. It's my Inspire by Example shirts.
Oh, I love it.
Because you are inspiring by example. And that's the biggest thing is I want you to know how much it matters, what you're doing, the message you're sharing, the fact that you're living by example, the fact that your content's changing a little more authentic and vulnerable, which I just love. I cheer for that in a huge way. And live in it. And, you like you had mentioned earlier that, today's a hard day, but I'm doing it anyway. And you can too. That's the essence of inspiring by example. And I just want to applaud you for it. I'm grateful to know you. I'm grateful to call you a friend. And I want to thank you for being who you are and for the impact you're making on the world, because the world needs more people like you. And I hope that this thing explodes for you and that you impact as many people as you can. And so thank you, and don't stop because it matters.
I appreciate this, man. I love it. And I love black. And I just tell you, dude, like attracts like. It's not a coincidence that you and I met. So
thank you.
Yeah.